This is a first video in a 6-part series in which we're going to show you exactly how to get started using SharePoint Online. We're going to start off with this video, which is all about what is SharePoint. It's meant for complete beginners and it shows you use cases for SharePoint. We're then going to talk a bit about document library basics in the second video, and by the third video we're going to be talking a lot more about the advanced features of document libraries. By the fourth video we're going to be looking at how we work with navigation instead of SharePoint, and by the fifth video we're going to be looking at creating content like news articles, events, surfacing files on SharePoint, and the final video we're going to be talking about the best practices for search. So if you want to get started with SharePoint Online or you know somebody is, then this training course is for you. Enjoy this video and make sure that you join the membership of this channel to watch future videos of this training series.
Hello and welcome to this training video starting off with what is SharePoint Online. So at its core, SharePoint is a powerful collaboration and content management platform developed by Microsoft. It enables organizations to create, store and organize the information and resources in a secure and user-friendly environment. SharePoint is available as part of Microsoft 365, which has got a wide variety of different products and tools, making it easily accessible and seamless to integrate with other Microsoft tools. SharePoint is actually available on any device that's connecting to the internet, so you can get access through a browser, but you can also install a mobile app, the SharePoint mobile app, onto your phone, tablets, which is available on both Android and iOS devices. We're going to talk a little bit about some use cases for SharePoint, but first let's just start off by actually how to log in. How do we get to the SharePoint interface? I'm just going to open up a browser tab and I'm going to go into in private browsing because I want it to force me to log in. Now, if you've not logged in before, this is the process that you'll typically follow. But if you've logged in previously, it will save your credentials and you won't need to do this every time. Now, to access SharePoint, you can do it in two ways. I'm going to show you the very manual way of doing it, but actually you could have someone send you a link, like a hyperlink URL, and that could be taking you to your specific SharePoint intranet. Now, if I just go, let's say for example, let's just start this off by going to Google. Now, if I was to search for office.com, that's actually the home page of Microsoft 365. So by clicking on that, that's going to take me to the Microsoft 365 landing page. Now, SharePoint is a product inside of Microsoft 365. And we'll see all the different products of Microsoft 365 in a moment once we've logged in. We simply click on the sign in button, and then what we'll need to do is provide our sign in email address followed by our password. Now, you should have been provided this already by potentially your IT administrators or maybe your line manager or colleagues. So if I was to log in, so I'm going to log in with admin@tascam.onmicrosoft.com, as that's my email address for my test Microsoft 365 environment. I'm going to type in my password, and then I've got something enabled which is called Microsoft multi-factor authentication, which you may have activated before on other things like banking apps. Essentially, multi-factor authentication is just going to send me a message that I can either enter a code from an app on my phone, or I'm actually just going to say send me a text message, which will send me a little text message with a multi-factor authentication code to my mobile phone so that Microsoft 365 knows that this is actually me. Now, this is not enabled by default. Most organizations do turn this on though, so you might have some level of multi-factor authentication that's been set up for you, or if it's your first ever time logging in, it will ask you to set that up as part of the process of your first login. But there is a step-by-step guide which will guide you through that. You'll then ask, do you want to stay signed in? You say yes, and that just means if I move between different tabs in my browser, I don't need to keep logging in every single time. So here we go. This has now brought me to the home page of Microsoft 365. which is where I'm now going to navigate to SharePoint. Now, there's two ways you can do this from anywhere inside of Microsoft 365. The first, actually, I should say three, actually. The first is we could see if the app appears on the left-hand side here, which is a list of all the frequently used apps. Or I can click on the app launcher, and I'll be able to see by clicking on SharePoint, that will take me through from here. Or I can search the word SharePoint in the top, and that'll take me through to the app as well. Now, the first thing just to mention is actually when you go through to the SharePoint page is that this is not necessarily your SharePoint intranet homepage. So when people talk about SharePoint, typically what they mean is their intranet homepage. I mean, we'll talk about a lot of other use cases for SharePoint shortly, but actually the first thing is actually that SharePoint, this tab here, is more of a search and navigation and content platform which is pulling things from SharePoint. Now, SharePoint in itself isn't just one site. Again, it's another common misconception that SharePoint is just one intranet homepage. It's not. SharePoint is, think of it as a whole cluster of mini internal websites. You might have an intranet homepage which is one way of kind of tying all of those things together, and we'll talk about hub sites and things like that. But essentially, this area is for seeing sites that you're following and ones which you've recently accessed and featured as well. So your IT admins will be able to set featured ones here, which are ones that they think people want to quickly access. You'll also be able to see news that have been rolled up from all the different SharePoint sites you have access to, as well as the frequent sites that you've accessed. It's worth mentioning as well, you'll only ever see things in the SharePoint platform that you have access to. Again, we'll be talking in further kind of videos about access levels and things like that, but just rest assured that you'll only see things that you should be able to see. You won't see something pop up from, say, the CEO's private set of documents, for example. It will only show you the documents that you are actually allowed to see. So let's talk about some use cases for SharePoint, because it's not just as simple as saying it just stores documents or it's an internal intranet website. There's a lot of different use cases for it. So let's talk about a few of those. So let's address first off the most important, what most people know of SharePoint, which is document management. So SharePoint provides a centralized repository for documents, making it easy for teams to store and even have version control and collaborate around files in real time. You can edit documents in real time and see who's making edits to those documents, which is what we call co-authoring, which means multiple people can edit the same documents at the same time. Again, we're going to go into document management in a lot more detail later on. But this is what an advanced SharePoint document library could look like, with a version number, the icons of the documents, the names of the documents, potentially tagging them with things like expiry dates and things like that. So this might be a policies document library that lives on our intranet. This provides a single source of truth where everyone knows they can go to get the latest version of the policy. So it means that I don't have to sort of email it as an attachment, and somebody might have it saved on their computer, I might have it saved on my computer, and then people end up with different versions. We know that we can all go to one place and see the latest version of that SharePoint document. Another use case for SharePoint is what we call team sites. So you can create dedicated team sites where members can work together on projects, share updates, and access relevant information and files whilst fostering a collaborative environment. So what this actually means is that you can create these collaborational spaces where you can have things like useful links, share upcoming events, share documents and videos, countdown timers, as well as having org charts and news and things like that in a collaborative space. You can also attach to that a Microsoft team for collaboration. Now, if you create you can also do it the other way around. So if you create a Microsoft team, they'll automatically create you a SharePoint team site, because all of the files which are being created inside of your team need somewhere to be stored, and they're actually getting stored inside of a SharePoint team site. You can go into the Files tab of Microsoft Teams, and there'll be an option that says Open in SharePoint, and that it will load a SharePoint page. You can then choose to edit that to make it look a bit more like this. This is just an example of a staff site. So say, for example, this was part of a school or college or university's SharePoint intranet. They might have a staff site specifically for their employees. Another use case is creating a platform where you can share, publish, and communicate with a specific audience. Now, here's an example of what they call a communication site. So the previous site we were just looking at is known as a team site, and this site is known as a communication site. So there's only two different types of site that you'll ever come across, but they're just configured in different ways. The reason why you have a team site is that it's for a lockdown, smaller group of people to collaborate. And as I say, it's typically assigned to a Microsoft team for that collaboration and instant messaging features, whereas a communication site, and Microsoft used to call them publishing sites, because it's about publishing information to the wider organization or to a specific audience. So this is an example of a communication site where we've got engineering onboarding. So the engineering department of this fake company has a SharePoint, a communication SharePoint site where their new starters coming into their department can go in and they can get a little bit of welcome message. They can find out how people work, the team culture, quick links, meet some of the new team members which are joining at the same time, useful contacts, things like that. But it's all information stored in one place as a self-service portal, so that the people can meet the team, find out who the leadership team are, find out about what the priorities of the department are, maybe get some help and support. Maybe there's links to relevant resources which are on here, or what to expect within the first day or week or month working for the organization. But it's about communicating information, giving people information that they can get access to. So these are just some of the use cases of SharePoint and why people use SharePoint. Fundamentally, it could be used for all sorts of things, like project management, for collaborating with people, sharing timelines and documents and things like that. You can build external facing SharePoint sites. So you could bring in suppliers or contractors or customers and clients into SharePoint to share documents in two directions. You could build out a knowledge base with wiki information, guides and useful information. You could build out documents and records management type of platforms, or HR benefits and employee onboarding portals as a self-service area that people can go and find out about company information and benefits and things like that. Essentially, all of this can be built inside of SharePoint. The next main thing which SharePoint is used for, though, is SharePoint intranets. Now, we've talked about a little bit about the document management and some other aspects that SharePoint is used for, but fundamentally, probably why you're watching this video is that you're looking to get a bit of knowledge around using SharePoint as a SharePoint intranet. A SharePoint intranet is a private and secure network within an organization that uses Microsoft SharePoint Online, for example, as the underlying platform. It serves as an internal website or portal accessible only to employees and authorized personnel of the organization. The primary purpose of a SharePoint intranet is to facilitate collaboration, communication, and information sharing among team members and departments. Here is a typical intranet homepage. So an intranet will typically have a homepage which acts as the kind of main landing point for people. Sometimes it's even set up so it's the default browser, the default website when you open up your browser. It can also be linked up so that at the top of your Microsoft 365, you could have a logo or something like that. When you click on it, it could automatically take you to the SharePoint site as well. So it's often called things like the hub, but it could be, some people have seen it called the landing or one place, or there's loads of names. It doesn't really matter, but essentially that is your kind of intranet landing point. And the main purpose about it is to provide a navigational point to other SharePoint areas, other SharePoint sites and pages, files and folders, and also linking off to maybe some other third-party websites and applications. So say, for example, it might be things like submitting an expense request or a annual leave request that's opening up into a different website altogether. Any of these navigational areas that we see within inside of an intranet, they are linking to a hyperlink, a URL, something that starts with HTTPS. And that could be anything. As I say, it could be something internal, like a SharePoint site, file, or folder. But equally, you could link out to like a payroll online system, for example, for people to see their pay slips, or to another third-party CRM system like Salesforce, or any of these other tools and products that you might be using that you want people to easily be able to find. It's very common as well for helping people like new starters to actually know where everything is. Again, thinking of building this single source of truth approach where you just know that you can go there and find links to everything that you need. So what an intranet would look like is typically there'll be some kind of navigation, and it could be something like this, a hub navigation bar which has got some drop downs, and it could be up to 3 layers. So it could be, say, departments. Underneath that we've got, for example, global sales, and then we could jump to our CRM system, our sales pipeline, things like that. So it's got some level of navigation, and typically that navigation inside of your intranet will remain consistent, meaning no matter where you go within the intranet, you'll typically then find that the navigation will stay consistent, so you could easily move around without having to come all the way back to the intranet homepage. You can choose to follow a site. So what we were looking at earlier when we went to that SharePoint navigation page from the Microsoft 365 homepage, we saw that there was an area that we could see sites we're following. So by clicking on that following, that will again give us the access to come back to that quickly and find the SharePoint sites that we're truly interested in. Then further down on the page, you can see we've got an area where we can create new content, which is things like news articles and pages and things like that. But typically you might only have access to create content on some sites, not all sites. So that option might not be available to you on the intranet homepage, but maybe that you're going to be a content creator for one of the department sites, for example. There is a little bit of area for analytics. So analytics will show you things like who's recently, it's not exactly who, but page views, as well as average time spent and traffic onto that particular SharePoint site as well. So some basic analytics. And then as you scroll down, you'll notice that this bar will kind of stay where it is. It might get a bit smaller as you scroll down the page, but that header was kind of sticky and will stay where it is. Then as you scroll down, you'll see all of the rest of this is then the body of the page. So this is the content of the page. Now, a typical intranet will have a good mixture of things like navigation. It will also have slideshow scrollers. So this is actually showing some news articles spinning around. It might also have things like policies, links off to policies, materials, forms. It might have some embedded SharePoint functionality, things like documents, libraries with approval processes and things like that. Mission statements, so give the vision and values of the organization directly on the intranet homepage. Some news, so some roll-up news articles, and typically the news is coming from multiple areas of SharePoint, like other department sites. Same goes for upcoming events as well. It's very common to be promoting events from around your organization, and they might be rolling up from different departments, and you can choose to add them into your own calendar as a reminder. Again, more call to actions, pointed to some key areas that you want to promote to people. Scrolling back up to the top, this particular layout has got a useful links section to some key business applications. We can do things like posting the latest tweets from a certain Twitter handle. We've got quick charts, which can show some very quick graphs and things like that. If you're using Power BI already, you can embed Power BI reports directly into SharePoint natively as well. That's really simple and easy to do. Same goes for videos. You can embed Stream videos, which is Stream is another product inside of Microsoft 365, or you could grab a YouTube video and put that on there as well. So this is just a typical intranet homepage. So this is the type of thing that you can expect to see as an intranet homepage. It might look different, but the functionality will likely be very similar. Intranets will also typically be an ambassador for your brand. So often it will have a subtle theme, so follow your colors, but also the imagery, the tone of voice, the text which is being used throughout the intranet is often very similar to maybe your public-facing website. So the look and feel should complement your overall brand. So that's essentially a SharePoint intranet. Now, as I say, they might have slightly different look and feels. Yours might look different to this. This is a common kind of layout, but there's all sorts of different ways that your SharePoint homepage could be configured. As part of an intranet, you'd also expect that there'd be some department sites, as we mentioned before. Often department sites will share a very similar look and feel as each other, but they need to be different to what your intranet homepage looks like. Just so you know when you're navigating around that you've landed on a department site. Now, a department site is not necessarily something that's being used for collaboration. Now, to be clear, I'm talking about a communication site being used as a department site. Team SharePoint sites as a template are for collaboration and then for the actual internal department to be working together, whereas a communication site is more about offering up information to the wider organization about what that particular department does and what they offer the rest of the organization. So it might be that there's some content about who we are, so a page about the leadership team, how we work, vision and priorities, culture, resources, things like that, as well as a bit of information on the homepage, maybe a bit of a bio of the department, quick links which relate to that particular department, events which relate to that department, as well as useful documents and downloads, forms, things like that. So say, for example, if it was finance, there might be some quick links which go off to an expense request system. It might also have latest information on budgets and forecasts and how the organization is getting on financially, as well as things like news for updates and maybe a bit of an FAQ as well, so how to do things with a bit of text, image and links out to more information. But the idea being is that you would have multiple department sites which would share a similar department layout, and the reason being is, as I say, to make it so it's not disorientating when you're jumping between the different department sites. You know where you're going to find information about, for example, like who they are, or useful links or documents that you know are going to relate to that particular department. And then that's rolled out multiple times. You then add that to the navigation across the top, and then you can have some quick links which go into certain areas of that department, maybe jumping directly into the expense requests as an example. But this is all just making up part of that overall intranet feel. And then finally, what I want to talk about is the different areas that you can store documents inside of Microsoft 365. So I'm not going to go too much into these other products because I don't want to cause confusion. This training video is about SharePoint, so I want to keep it to SharePoint. But you are going to hear about two other products as well when you're working with Microsoft 365. You've got OneDrive and Teams, and there's three areas that files could be stored inside of Microsoft 365. You've got SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams. So SharePoint, as we've discussed, is almost like a organization-wide platform. Typically, it's for intranets, which everyone in the organization might have read access to everything, but only certain people have edit access. So you might say, for example, if you work in a HR department, you might be the person that's responsible for having edit access to the department's site, so you can add documents, news articles and events and things like that, just to maintain the content which is on that SharePoint site. So to recap, SharePoint is about sharing information to the wider organization and building out that information portal as an intranet, versus OneDrive. So OneDrive is your personal document storage space. You can access it through a browser like you can do with SharePoint. You can also access it through File Explorer, and you can sync files offline. In another training video, we will be talking about syncing documents offline. The confusing part is that OneDrive is also the name of the application which syncs SharePoint. So that can get a little bit confusing. But OneDrive, think of it, if you think of SharePoint from, let's just go back a step and think about a legacy IT infrastructure. A lot of people are used to things like what they call map drives or shared drives. So before cloud computing existed, you might have heard of things like G drive or X drive or Y drive or something like that, which is a mapped drive. And essentially that is to a file server which lives somewhere within inside of your organization, and you would be able to access files. Now, typically, that was like policies and forms and things that everybody had access to. And that's what SharePoint's replaced. Whereas OneDrive is your own personal document storage space. That's a little bit like on File Explorer, where you used to have things like My Documents, my images and things like that. They are specific to you, and that is your OneDrive area. So documents should only live in your OneDrive if they're only really for you to edit and use. Whereas if something is a publishing area, so it's like a latest policy or a form or a template, that should probably live on SharePoint. I do advocate people make the most out of using OneDrive, because OneDrive, everybody who has a license has up to 1 terabyte of OneDrive storage space. So that's a lot of storage space. And actually, to put that into perspective, a medium-sized business might have 2 terabytes of SharePoint and Microsoft Teams storage space combined. So if you imagine every department site, every department team, all of those things, all the project stuff, all combined into one has 2 terabytes. But say, for example, there's 200 employees of that business, there's 200 potential terabytes of OneDrive storage space. So that's why I say don't use things like SharePoint and Teams as a dumping ground for your files or drafts or things which only you need access to. Use your OneDrive for that. So you know it's safe, it's stored, but no one else necessarily needs to have access to it. But you can share out from OneDrive if you wanted to. You can share out files, so it doesn't mean just because it lives in OneDrive that no one else can get access to it. Then you've got Microsoft Teams. So you might already be using Microsoft Teams for things like meetings and instant messaging and chats and things like that, but you can also use it to store and collaborate on documents together with your team. So Teams is more your day-to-day collaboration with your team, with your department. As I say, Microsoft Teams does create a SharePoint team site in the background. So you are actually using Teams, you're using a team SharePoint site. As you can see, it gets a bit confusing, the terminology. You're already using the SharePoint team site without realizing it. So before Microsoft Teams was a thing, people would be using the SharePoint team sites as their collaborational space, but it's more common now that people are using it through the Microsoft Teams interface. Apologies again for saying the word Teams about 1,000 times. But that's essentially it. So SharePoint, as I say, is your publishing platforms, your wider organization of content, things like policies, procedures, forms, templates. OneDrive is your personal storage space for things like drafts, things you're working on, things that other people don't necessarily need to have access to. And Teams is your collaborational space, so documents that you're working on with your department in isolation, and it's part of that daily grind of documents that you're working on. So I hope that all made sense to you. So as a recapper, this was the What is SharePoint Online training video. Hopefully now you've got a bit of a basic understanding of what SharePoint is, what people are using it for, and what it's potentially capable of achieving for your organization.
I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, then there is more videos as part of this fundamentals training that you can access. To do so, you need to actually become a member of my channel. You'll find a link inside of the description of this video, which will take you to a page that looks a bit like this. From here, you can click on the join button and you can see that the membership is only 99p a month. So it's not going to break the bank. You'll get not only some loyalty badges, which they look a bit naff at the moment, but I am having some better ones created. You'll have access to this priority Q&A area. So any questions which come out of the back of your training, you can ask them inside of this area here. I do my best to answer everyone's questions inside of all videos, but over time it's getting more and more difficult. So I'm going to have this priority area for answering any questions that come out the back of the training courses. Also, you've got access to all the exclusive content inside of this channel. So it's not just about the fundamentals training, but there's also another members only training, which is essentially building a modern intranet with a nice SharePoint homepage and department sites. There's also an area which you can submit votes for future training courses as well. So if this all sounds good, then follow the link and become a member of my channel and watch more of this exclusive training content. Thank you.